Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
Okay, it is Declaration Day for Yannick Conan Niederhauser. He has until 11:59 tonight to tell everybody what he will do between staying in the NBA draft or returning to Penn State. So today is the day, and he had his last workout yesterday, I believe. And now, it's been a waiting game. We'll see. To his credit, he has done very well. I'm not surprised because I think he's a heck of a player.
So the countdown is on, is what we're saying.
Yeah, the countdown's been on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's gone through the process.
Mm-hmm.
If he comes back, he's going to have a lot of advice that I think will make him a better player.
Yeah.
If he goes, it's going to depend. I mean, the latest NBA ranking had him 47, and that is the definition of gray area in the NBA.
Yeah.
You're right on the verge
that
of
mid-second round.
Are you playing? Well, it's even slightly past that. You're 17 picks past the first round.
Yeah, the mid-second round.
You're 12 picks away from being out of the draft. So it's like, okay, and it's a gray area as to does that mean you're going to the G League? There's nothing wrong with going to the G League at all. But you don't make a lot of money going to the G League.
Could he make more money coming back to Penn State?
All right,
that's the question.
If you're a two-way player, you obviously make more because the average G League salary is about $40,000. The two-way player salary, I believe, is $567. If I'm, ballpark that. If you're a two-way, I know you look it up and see if that's right.
$560. Give or take.
No, so I overestimate.
It pays half the value of rookie minimum salary. So
yeah, which is 1.1 is the rookie minimum. In the NBA. So that's the number. Can he make more here next year? Yes. Then actually, can he make more here next year than either one of those numbers? Yes. But he's got to decide as to whether he feels coming back will benefit him to come back, and is he being told by NBA people, "Hey, if you come back next year, you could be really good"?
Could he find his way to the top first round next year because of his return?
Right. I mean, can he have a Zach Edey type of year, where Edey was not a draftable player after his sophomore year? He was probably on the outside looking in at the end of his junior year, and then played his way to the 9th overall pick in the draft. Now, Edey is a different type of player,
but it's
than
the
Yannick
same.
is.
It's the same concept we've discussed a lot, which is that the NBA draft model, and in terms of the scheduling, it's not perfect. We've discussed that, but it's better because the players.
The draft model for the NBA is exponentially
better than the NFL.
I mean, they're not even in the same realm because the calendar.
Yes.
The calendar makes it work better.
Yeah.
It's tough on the with college football and the NFL because the calendar doesn't quite work with a new semester and things like that.
Is it perfect? No. Is it better? Absolutely.
No doubt.
And the thing is, let's say he does return. He now is going to be told by the scouts, these are the 5 things we need you to work on next season. And I guarantee you, Rhodes and co. are going to be like, yeah, we agree with them. These are what you have to work on to be better in general.
And these are the things they talk to him about anyway. And I know Joe has talked to him, Joe Crispin, about how he'd like to make a couple of changes with him offensively next year. But he has to be back here next year to make those changes. Or does he sit there and it's part of it all depends on family. Part of it depends on the agent. The agent's looking for a commission. That's why I'm always like a little leery about what the agent thinks. I don't know who the agent is. Couldn't even begin to guess. But no. So now we sit there and we wait. I mean, and he has to go with what he thinks is best for him. So, and if you know him at all, he's an easy young person to root for. I mean, we will see.
And when it comes to other college players who announced their options yesterday, Yaxel Langborg,
which is a surprise. A lot of people thought he'd be a first round pick.
Yeah, he was projected to go in top 30. He then opted to go back to college and is now transferring to Michigan. He was at UAB.
Right.
He entered the portal, said if he transfers to Michigan, if not, he'll go to the NBA.
Right.
He chooses Michigan and the Wolverines. And Alex Condon, the Australian big man, returns to Florida, wants to go back-to-back with the Gators.
Yeah.
So
and as we mentioned yesterday, Mackenzie Mbako is going to go to Texas A&M, transferring from Indiana, but he had already put his name in the portal before. So we will find out. The Big Ten coaches meetings have been taking place. Jed Fish of Washington was talking about scheduling. And what he said about scheduling is this, is that and I agree with him on this. I think he made an excellent point. No West Coast team should play a game before 3:30. I'm talking about 3:30 Eastern. He says no team from the East playing on the West Coast should play any game later than 3:30 on the West Coast. In other words,
it's logical.
In other words, don't do what they did to Rutgers last year, where the game kicked off at 11 o'clock Eastern time when they played at USC on a Friday night. You're like, who comes up with this?
It's logical from him because if you're going from east to west, why are you going to play at 2 a.m.? If you're going west to east, why are you going to play at 9 a.m.?
Well, he had back-to-back games last year with Iowa and Indiana on the road.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're telling me, I mean, that's fair? That's not fair. Look, I thought the Big Ten did a good job of scheduling for the most part. The Eastern teams going west, there were 14 of them. 8 of them had a bye week the next week, including Penn State. After they played USC, they had a bye week. Then they went out to Wisconsin. Okay, 6 of them had home games the next week. So for Penn State this upcoming year, their West Coast trip is to UCLA. They are playing a home game the next week with Northwestern. Okay, that part was thought out. I think they got a little sloppy with what they did with Washington. I mean, because Washington had to play at Rutgers, had to play at Penn State, had to play at Indiana. It's 3 East Coast Eastern time zone games they had to play. Now, the Penn State game at least was at night.
Yeah.
But it also meant they got back at
whatever time. Yeah. Whatever. 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Because they played that night game. They probably left State College 11 midnight, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and then, of course, they get the 3 hours, I guess, they came back. My guess is they got back at 6:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning Pacific time.
That is just rough.
So, I mean, that has to be looked at, but I agree with them. Any West Coast team should not be playing any game before 3:30 when they go to the Eastern time zone. And to be honest with you, it should be the same whatever time zone they go to. Central time zone? What do you want them playing? I mean, they played Iowa at noon. That's 11 a.m.
There should be guidelines. It's like it's got to be played within this time range depending on where you're coming from.
I mean, if you're playing at noon, you're telling a team to play at 9 o'clock in the morning. Really? 9 a.m.? Really? Yeah. No. That's. I mean, if you're going to do something this ambitious, you have to come up with some outside of the box thinking to make ambitious work. Now, did they do some of that with, as I mentioned, with bye weeks following trips or home games following trips? Yeah, but was it perfect for everybody? No. The basketball scheduling. Basketball scheduling needs to be discussed in this vein. When you go in, I completely agree with playing the 2 games on the coast, right? Because proximity. It's 2 road games. That's fine. That's no big deal. But, for example, everybody was in this boat, so it wasn't just Penn State.
Yeah.
Penn State played Saturday at UCLA. They didn't play till Tuesday against USC. For goodness sakes, you can't play on Friday, Sunday, or Saturday, Monday. You're already there.
Yeah. Get rid of the extra day and a half, 2 days
right.
that it
There's
takes.
no need to do it. You're already there. Okay?
And then give them on the back end
and don't tell
an
me
extra
about
day off.
And don't tell me about recovery. And don't tell me about recovery because you play the Big Ten tournament consecutive days.
And that's the point is if you're word of recovery, okay, then after that 2 games, give the extra 2 days on the back end so teams can have an extra day of recovery after the fact they just played 2 games in 3 days. Give them full 6 days off afterwards instead of giving them 4 days off after big travel. Give them 6. Yeah. Make it so they play that second game on that Monday, as you said. Let's say Saturday, Mondays, they play the California teams. And they don't play until Saturday the next week at home. Give them full 6 days.
Sure. I mean,
it's not tough.
And this happened with everybody. I was talking with Don Fisher, because Don, when we were talking last week, and Don does the Indiana games. Mm-hmm. He said, how'd you guys feel about the West Coast games? And he was talking to Mike Grimm of Minnesota and myself. And I said, worked out, but I would have knocked off a day. Mm-hmm. Right? And they agreed with that. And he said, because we did the Washington-Oregon swing, and Don unfortunately got laryngitis during the swing. He said, I couldn't believe I got sick. But he said, all we did was stay in the hotel. Mm-hmm. He said, we played Seattle first, he said, and then we flew to Eugene. I said, you fly to Portland or Eugene? He said, no, we flew straight into Eugene. I said, okay. And he said, so we practiced and sat around.
Yeah.
I mean that makes no sense to me. Mm-mm. That makes no sense to me. You play the game, say you're playing at Washington, say they're the first game, either way, and say you play on a Saturday, whatever. We're on the plane an hour and a half later, you're in Eugene. Mm-hmm. Okay, boom. And then, now you spend... Okay, get some rest on Sunday, do a walk through the whole thing, then play the next game, get in the plane, fly back. Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you're back for Tuesday. You're all good to go.
I mean, okay, again, you're asking players to play. Mm-hmm. If you're playing in an in-season tournament, you're playing a minimum of 2 games in the in-season tournament. So this year, this past season, Penn State played at Daytona. Mm-hmm. Well, they played on a Monday and they played on a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that was okay? Okay. Penn State has, 2 years ago was in the Big Ten tournament championship game. Well, Penn State played on a Thursday, won, played on a Friday, won, played on a Saturday, won, then played on Sunday. Mm-hmm. But that was okay.
Mm-hmm. That's how it works, Steve.
That was okay. Especially with the L.A. thing. You're just in L.A., Okay? The campuses are separated by 15 miles. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. There's certain elements that they have to do that have to make sense. Now, the next part, and he talked about this, and he brought it up in the meeting, about athletes being employees. That's something I've always resisted. But it's something that I have to adapt and change my mind to, because I don't think you can straighten out the system that you have right now unless the athletes actually are employees. And the reason I say that, and remember I talked about the Dartmouth thing, about the unionization part. I said it's ridiculous. They won 6 games this year. I'd have fired all of them. Sorry. I looked at the collective bargaining agreement. You are very good. You didn't really uphold your end of the bargain here, right? And so I talked about that, and I thought it was wrong at the time, and so forth. And part of the reason I thought it was wrong is I don't think you should go out as a lone wolf and do it.
No.
Right? And then you notice and then Dartmouth wouldn't deal with them. At all. They finally dropped it. They finally dropped it because Dartmouth would not deal with them at all.
Nope.
But I've got to look at the big picture of this. And in the big picture of this, I think there's the only way I think you can straighten this out where you have parameters. Placed on NIL, parameters placed on a cap, parameters placed on the transfer portal, parameters placed still on the academic part of it. All right? I think you can only do that through collective bargaining. The players have to have a say in what is going on, which means they have to be represented by somebody.
You know what would be logical, at least from where I'm sitting, in terms of making this happen? is there are a lot of former athletes, former members of the NBA, NFL, MLB player associations go into the pool of people you have that used to be in those, whether it's Dominique Foxworth, I know, was a part of the NFL, I believe, PA.
Right.
Get players like that who have been involved in that process with the pro side and have them come in and build a consulting group to help them figure out how it's going to be structured with collegiate sports as a whole. Because they have an understanding of the pro side of things from the athlete side, and they'll be able to help translate it because most of them will have played college sports. They can have at least a ballpark idea of where they're going with it.
Well, the issue for me is going to be this. I think that there's no question that the two entities that need it are football and men's basketball.
Yes.
Okay. They're the two entities. That's what this all revolves around. Okay. And that's with all due respect around here to the other 29 sports.
They make the world go around.
Okay. And football especially really makes it go around. And that's what you're talking about. When people are talking about these ideas of employees, they are not thinking about the surfing team. They're not thinking about the beach volleyball team. They aren't. All right? That's with all due respect to all the wonderful athletes that play beach volleyball. They aren't. Okay? They're thinking, this whole thing has been, why is Washington in the Big Ten? Well, not because of the rowing team. They're in because of the football team. Yeah. And secondarily because of the men's basketball team. It's just the way it is. But my question is, Penn State has 833 athletes on campus.
Yes.
Are they all represented by one entity negotiating for them? And I'm talking about when I mean 833 here, 800 plus at Ohio State, 800 over at Michigan. Is this entity X amount at Alabama, X amount at Georgia? Are they negotiating for everybody? And that's
the question.
That's the question. So you have to build into something like this. A, are they employees? What does that mean for medical? What does that mean for pensions? What does that mean for transfer portal? What does that mean for NIL? What does that mean for distributions? What does that mean for caps? Right? And I think it's the only way to go. I can't think of another way. The current way is not the way.
A collective bargaining agreement has to take place for this to make any sort of sense, and also to make it, just give it a structure. That's the problem, as we've been discussing, is you are trying to contain the ocean with small
with sandbags.
With sandbags, and you need the sand to be out of the bags to help it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
No.
And in that same realm, I think I proposed this before on the show. I don't remember if I have, but with all of the transfers going down in soccer we discussed yesterday, this came back to my brain of, should there be some sort of transfer fee or a clause that has to be paid for a player to be transferred, not from the player paying it, or maybe it's either the player has to pay it, or the college he's transferring to has to pay it based on where he is in the scale of it all. So let's say you're team number 1, which in this case is, I guess, Ohio State. Let's say you're at 1, you want to go down to 7. They may not have to pay it, but if you're at 7, you want to go up to 1, there's a transfer fee attached.
Right.
It scales up based on if you're moving up the ladder, because that way, let's say you're Jackson Lenberg at UAB and you want to transfer to Michigan. Let's say the NBA draft was out of it. Michigan has to pay a fee to UAB that would be larger because of the gap between the two teams than it would if he was going from Michigan to UAB. Something I wonder if there's a way to do something of that sort. Maybe not that exact model, but something in the collegiate space to make it so players can't just, as we've seen with certain guys like an AJ Storr, 7 schools in 7 years is just bonkers.
But I think the difference is going to be, it's going to be more of the U.S. pro model instead of the transfer model. In other words, you're not going to transfer because you signed a 2-year contract with me.
Yeah. There'll be some sort of structure to it.
And contracts would then be a part of this basic agreement. Now, the next part is at some point they're going to have to talk about teams that make the NCAA basketball tournament and teams that make the college football playoff. Do the players get some of the money from that? That's not a discussion they're having yet. The latest model they're talking about is the SEC likes what's called 5+11.
I saw that. And what does that mean?
Well, 5+11 is easy.
Okay.
It's the one. And if you're asking me which one has common sense, it's this one. The 5 highest ranked conference champions make it.
They're in, guaranteed.
And then after that, you have 11 at-large teams.
Yeah.
So in other words, which is what
it's
last year you had 8 at-large teams essentially. You had 5 conference champions, which through the conference championship games were Oregon, Clemson, Georgia, and Boise State. Okay. Then after that, it goes by at large. Now, you'd change up how it's seeded. It would be 1 through 16.
Versus, as we said, and the people have been discussing it last year, Boise State got 4th. The thought would then be,
which
Boise State just is in. They're guaranteed a spot. It's just not seeded. They're not seeded 4th because they were a conference champion. They're seeded 1 through 16 with everyone else, which I agree makes sense because you see it in college basketball a lot of the time where teams don't win their conference championship, but they're, let's say it's a Duke UNC year where both Duke and UNC are great. Duke is undefeated. They lose the one game to UNC, but UNC has 7 losses. They're going to be seeded like 4th, but Duke is going to be a 1 seed because they're the best team in the nation. Like, that's just what it is. That model makes sense from just a complete logical perspective of like, you're in.
Okay. Now, these are the coaches expressing it. The ADs are not expressing it the same way in the SEC. Scott Strickland at Florida and Trev Alberts at Texas A&M are 2 that are very strong voices in the room saying they want 4 automatic qualifiers because it then they feel allows them to adopt the 9th conference game. Okay? In other words, if we have 4 automatic qualifiers, we're not taking as big a risk of now scheduling another conference game, which, by the way, would bring with it a little bit more money in the negotiation with ESPN. All right. That's what they're looking at. Like Lane Kiffin says he wants the 16 best schools in there, but Kirby Smart said he wants a model to include the most SEC teams possible, which, by the way, 4 automatic qualifiers, so there still would be 3 at-larges. That doesn't mean there couldn't be another SEC team in there.
There's a chance.
And the reason that Kirby Smart brought it up is he says, look what happened with the NCAA men's basketball tournament, and look what just happened in the NCAA baseball tournament.
Yeah, 13 schools, I believe?
13 schools from the SEC are in, and 14 made it to the NCAA basketball tournament out of 16. And they ended up earning
crazy amount,
35 units. The Big Ten,
something like that.
The Big Ten earned 21, and they were second. Right, the ACC earned 9 or 10.
The SEC just has put the pedal to the metal on everyone else this year in terms of every sport. Basically.
So that's what they're talking about with that. And at some point, they have to have whatever model they're doing. It has to be in place by December 1st. That is actually the deadline for the 2026 model. It's December 1st.
Thanksgiving is basically when they'll have to have it taken care of.
Well, essentially. So December 1 is the date. Sankey says he's not crazy about the date. He said we'll work with it. He says, but it hampers our decision to go with 9 conference games. In other words, what if they make the decision to go with 4 automatic qualifiers from the Big Ten and the SEC, and then after that, whatever, and the decision is made on November 30th? Do they do a conference call on December 1st and say we're going to the 9 conference games? I mean, you can change the 9 conference games in a heartbeat. I mean, that's an internal conference issue.
You also could, I don't know.
They could do that in February.
And you know what else you could do, Steve? I believe they call it planning.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that word before? Planning ahead?
Yeah.
Heard of that? You could, if you're Greg Sankey, hypothetically, meet with everyone and say, let's say this happens, this will be what we do. But if it doesn't happen, we stick with the 8.
Yeah, there are people that like to have things settled before they vote.
But let's say,
but they could sit there in February and say, or in January, say, hey, let's sit down, let's talk. What about non-conference games? Now, I realize now you have to negotiate with your TV partner, ESPN. I realize that in that negotiation, by giving them more inventory, you're going to want more money. ESPN understands that, and they know how valuable the SEC contract is to them. I'm just glad that they seem to remember some of the names of the Big Ten teams that played. What?
Nothing.
What?
We have spent how many years now giving great ideas to the NCAA? And how many have been listened to, Steve?
Not many.
And if we're coming up with these ideas, you'd think the people who...
Well, you know they are. I mean, you know there's somebody in the room that's talking about it.
But there are 10 somebodies pitching nothing and just complaining, as we discussed yesterday.
But again, you have... Now, these are the coaches talking. So the coaches were meeting in the SEC. The coaches were meeting in the Big Ten. You know, I know Jed Fish brought up the employee thing. Well, if the vast majority of the coaches feel that way, that doesn't mean they're going to do it because they don't have a vote. Okay? The athletic directors are the ones that have the vote. And if you're like, hey, I feel this way, X, Y, and Z, and your athletic director's like, I don't know. I don't think we're going to do that. Well, it's not going to happen. I mean, the American Football Coaches Association makes recommendations every year on things.
Yeah.
And not all of them are adopted. I mean, when you have West Coast schools saying that they want to kick off no earlier than 3:30 when they play in the Eastern time zone, and they want to kick off, no later than 3:30 when they're playing an East Coast team out west, local time, which would be 6:30 Eastern time. I mean, I'd give some leeway and say 4 o'clock, make it 7, which now you're really into prime time. That's fine. I mean, do you think they're going to listen to that? I don't know. See, that's the part I'm not sure. I don't know how much people are listening to. And I'll never forget talking with Joe Paterno about this. He says, he said to me, we're just chit-chatting, I think we're going to do an interview or something. We're just chit-chatting. He looks at me and he says, you'd think after all these years of doing this, he says, people would want to hear my opinion as to what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah.
It was frustrating to him, dealing with it on the conference level. He said they got to do a couple things, which I know based on past experience, Steve, didn't work. He said, and there's a couple things that I know did work. And he says, it's just, I sit there and go, they don't really want to hear what I have to say. Like, okay. And that can be frustrating. And look, all those coaches in the room, the vast majority of them are veterans. I mean, James Franklin is going into his 12th season here, his 15th season overall as a head coach. Jed Fish has been a head coach. He's been in the NFL, right? Lincoln Riley's been in 2 different conferences. I mean, Deshaun Foster didn't have any real experience. Dan Lanning is still young, cutting his teeth in this. I mean, P.J. Fleck's been around for a long time. I mean, Signetti, he's been everywhere, right? He's been everywhere. Ryan Day now has enough behind him. Matt Rule's been everywhere. Greg Schiano's been several places, including the NFL. Same thing with Matt, right? Luke Fickell's now been a head coach for a while. I don't know. And I know there are a lot of factors that come into play. But at some point, and again, I was adamant at one point about, A, they can't be employees. I was adamant at one point about the value of the scholarship, which, by the way, I still am adamant about. I mean, you're talking that scholarship still is about a $200,000 to $250,000
commitment
deal when it's all said and done. It's not exactly. I mean,
it's not chump change.
Not exactly pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
So I'm still adamant about that, but my rigidity of opinion when it comes to employees has changed because it had to change. It has to change because this system that they have right now, where you have the BYU basketball team, I think that the number for them is $35 to $40 million. And Kyle, to be honest with you, I looked at the personnel. I'm not so sure they're going to win the Big 12. But that's a 30. Okay, it was a big deal that Kentucky was at 20, and BYU flew past that. Now, where they got the money, I have no idea, because it's between now or the last couple of months and June 30th. Before everything kicks in July 1 and all of a sudden the structure changes. That's why the wild money is being passed out right now.
Everyone's passing out money in every sport because of the last chance you have to really spend.
Right. Under the current system.
What system, Steve?
Yeah, exactly. There is no system. That's why, and that's why I've been talking for the past year and a half now about collective bargaining, because I have to make a realization as to what the real world is. Okay? The world of college sports is not the 1980s any longer. The world of college sports is not even the 2010s right now. Right? This system is not going back. No. Okay? It's not going back. I am all in favor of, and I've talked to groups about this, about, hey, look, you get NIL money, and to me it's roster retention money, which is big. And then can you selectively get a couple of guys? Okay. To me, that's a system that I can live with. But there's got to be more a collectively bargained agreement between players and schools, a.k.a. management, has to allow for, okay, you have a 2-year contract, there's a buyback in that contract. You want to transfer now? There's a buyback.
Yeah, that's what it is. There's got to be some sort of value put on it, so you can't just willy-nilly after a year go somewhere else.
Well, I'm sorry, but just like there's a buyout for a coach, there's going to be a buyout for you. And it's got to be in writing and in the contract. And are these contracts 2-year deals? Can they be 3-year deals? I don't know. Yeah,
let's say you sign a 2-year deal, and all of a sudden after 2 years, you can, of course, stay beyond that, but if you have 2 years, you're like, I'm going to transfer now. Cool, but your next college has to do the exact same 2-year deal. So another 2-year deal with somebody. Right. That should be what it is. You're limited to 2, 3, and 4-year deals. If within the 4-year deal, let's say you want to leave to the NFL afterwards, that's a clause in there, which is just after 3 years, you're going to the NFL. Go.
And by the way, you also have to make sure that in something like that, he's in a 2-year contract, and after 1 year, like, oh, it's something you want to transfer where? Like, when did they contact you?
Yeah.
Who did they contact? Is there tampering involved? We all know what the current system with the transfer portal. Tampering? Tampering. Oh.
Yeah.
It's common practice at some places.
Basically a cup of coffee. It's everywhere.
It's for some places it's common practice. Like, just happened to run into his high school coach. Just happened to run into his parents.
I happened to be at the same cafe. His parents and agent just happened to be at the same time as me.
All there at the same time. Talk about luck.
Crazy.
But this is where we are with this.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get this thing on track where because it's not just structure that the coaches can count on or the athletic department. It's not just structure that the players can count on. Okay? It's also structure that's really important that the fans can count on, because you've got a lot of fans right now that they badly want to win. And I know they're talking about TV ratings are up and attendance and whatever. Oh, yeah, so it's really working out great. Okay, what do I always say? Management by what? Walking around. And it's one thing that in my job, Like, for example, I'm going to speak to I've already spoken to a couple of groups already this year. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be speaking to the Laurel Highlands group coming up in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then I've got a group in Altoona I'm speaking to in August. Mm-hmm. I'm in a charity outing in Selinsgrove in August, and I have the Duquesne Club in Pittsburgh in August. And something tells me there'll be a couple more. Mm-hmm. Right? And, just
all over the place.
Yeah, everything kind of just comes up. And in management, by walking around, the fans are not happy with this. Okay? They're happy that their team is really good. I love hockey, they're in the Frozen Four. Oh, I love men's lacrosse, they're in the Final Four. I love women's volleyball, they're in the national championship. Wrestling's always great. Penn State football made the college football playoff Final Four. Right? So they're thrilled with the results. They don't like the process.
You know what? I think
they're turned off by the process.
And what I think of when you mentioned that is, in sports, we love our teams, but when we love our teams, we also learn to love certain players on those teams.
Yeah, there's an attachment.
There is an attachment there and a buy-in. Like, is Hideki Matsui the greatest Yankee ever? No, but he's beloved by the Yankees because that dude was awesome, and he was just fun. And he did things that were just wondrous to watch as a Yankees fan.
And in postseason, he was a good performer.
Exactly.
He's a better performer in postseason than the current star.
Yes. And then you go to the college.
I'm not joking.
And then you go to the college game, and the reason certain players are beloved by their schools, taking Duke, for example, the reason people love J.J. Redick and they love Christian Laettner and these guys is because they were there for 4 years. Right. They were there. You got an attachment to that guy. And even the fourth guy on the bench who's been there for 5 years and as a walk-on, you're like, I love him because he's there and he's been playing and he's like, it's just, there's a connection you get with a player and with the team.
Duke held off early entries for a long time. The first early entry for them was Eldon Brand. Mm-hmm. That was in the late 90s. And that's why when I've done this a couple times, so everybody, I think you probably have heard me talk about it, but there was one group I talked about when we were talking about NIL. And I said, how many of you pine for the old days when players stayed 4 years? And every hand in the room went up, which is what I expected. And I said, well, as Drew Allard, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Drew Shelton, by the way, is interning at the golf course. It's great seeing him every day. Venga Ioane, Nick Dawkins, Khalil Dinkins, Zane Durant, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zakiya Wheatley. I said, guess what? Because of NIL and roster retention money, they're all going into their 4th year at Penn State. All of them. I said, and because of NIL, I said, you got your wish. Now, James did give me a fist pump over that when I explained it to him. He goes, he said, I like the psychology of it. It says the psychology degree from the Harvard or the PSAC, East Stroudsburg.
The finest.
But I was trying to make a point. Like, in other words, it's not all bad. You can get your desired result because of money. Because, look, if you weren't going to pay the money, somebody else would have. Whether it was another school or the NFL. In other words, these guys could have gone into the draft. Now, would they have been, first day guys? Some would have been second day guys.
Yeah.
Right? Some would have been second day guys. And because you made sure that they were, quote, taken care of, you have your core group back along with A.J. Harris and along with Elliott Washington and along with Tony Rojas. You start going through like Zariah Fisher and all these other guys and those 3 wideouts that were brought in as transfer portal guys. Right? I mean, you were able to do that because of this. So my point was, you may not like the system, but but you're happy when the system works for you. I said, you have to put together a system that makes, there will be parts of the system the players aren't going to like. There are going to be parts of the system that the coaches don't like. But there's at least going to be a system that both can agree on to make work, which then in turn, I think makes the fans happy. where you're sitting there now, and so let's take Liverpool, for example. We talk about getting players in the transfer portal and so forth, but they have certain players, their star group, that is locked up. And they're going to be there next year. Liverpool fans are thrilled. They've got their guy, I assume Salah's locked up, right?
Salah signed a new contract, but that's the point is,
But you know how long he's going to be there. There's a thought process behind it. Philly fans know that Bryce Harper still has 9 more years to go in his contract. I think 8 more years to go in his contract.
I know.
Something like that. They know how long Schwarber is supposed to be there unless he's traded.
And that's the thing is in soccer, the player Martin Zubamendi plays Real Sociedad. He said to transfer Arsenal for 60 million euros. He has a release clause in his contract which says if this clause is met, he's transferring. Sociedad fans have known for years.
Sure.
He's here for the next 5 years, but if someone meets that number,
which everybody knows, it's out there in the open. Everybody knows. I mean, you look in the NFL, the contracts that are put out. T.J. Watt's right now not going to OTAs because he has 1 year to go on a 4-year, $112 million contract. Myles Garrett signed a 4-year, $160 million contract. Well, and Micah Parsons is going to blow past that, to be honest with you. Okay. I'm getting the sense that Watt does not want. He'd love to have $160 million over 4 more years, but he might take less when this is all said and done. Because when Watt signed his contract, and he's now finished 3 years of it, it was the primo contract for defensive ends. Like anything else in the NFL and in sports in general, it's been surpassed. If you're a Dodger fan, you know Ohtani's going to be there no matter what. You know Mookie Betts is going to be there no matter what. Okay, that kind of security, at least on a limited basis, is what I think the fans desire. Knowing that, okay, my quarterback, I've signed him for a 2-year deal. I've signed my wide receiver in a 2-year deal. So now they can start thinking that, because the thought process of college sports fans has been changed over time because of what the pros do. So in other words, before you had the wild transfer portal and so forth, you knew that if Saquon Barkley came in and he was ultra talented, he'd have to be at Penn State for 3 years. Because in the NFL, you can't go to the draft until after your 3rd year out of high school. Okay. Right? Okay. The NBA's had the high school thing, the one and done thing, dropped the high school thing, wanted to bring the high school thing back, still doing the one and done. Owners want a 2 and done, and college basketball has had that interesting relationship with the NBA because of the one and dones. I mean, Duke lost another guy today to a one and done. I think Coward's going to he transferred in from Washington State, I believe, and he's going to go to the NBA draft. He's not going to play for Duke. Okay. But I mean, so college basketball fans are a little more used to it. But when you're sitting there and you're putting together teams now, so I'll take this from a first-hand point of view. Okay. So it's this time of the year that I'll take time to put together all the preliminary work on charts. Name, height, weight, class, hometown, career high, passing, career high, rushing, longest pass, longest run, whatever, longest reception. Okay. And I've got all the football stuff done. I've got Nevada done through Rutgers right now. Now, obviously, I'll have to change it. It changes, but at least the basics are done, and essentially 90% of it's done. But it takes longer to do it now. Now, why does it take longer to do it? Because, okay, he transferred in. All right, this is his 3rd school. Okay, so what did he do at Texas A&M? What did he do at TCU? Okay, blah, blah, blah. You've got to do a lot more research on an individual player, because it's not just, hey, by the way, good news. Ethan Kalikmanis was the quarterback for Rutgers last year. He's the quarterback for Rutgers this year. Okay, well, that made him an easy one to do. Okay.
But look at that. Kyle Leff played in Nevada. He played in Oregon, and all of a sudden he's in Maine. Okay.
Then I got the Spikes ready, because I've got the preliminary roster on the Spikes. So I got them ready, which on all those guys you have to do research, because, I never heard of any of them. 2 of them actually three of them played in the league last year. So
are their names Jason Lord by any chance?
Enough of the mascots.
Oh.
All right. So, all right. But basketball, I haven't done much with basketball yet. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't take as long because it's usually 12 or 13 guys, players, right? There's certain rosters, like, for example, Purdue is set.
Mm-hmm.
But, for example, UCLA still has last year's roster up there. So the coaching staffs have been able to do. But because of the transfer portal, I've got to wait on some teams because some teams haven't even put out their 25, 26 roster yet. So I've been able to get some work done. It used to be, okay, graduated, draft. Mm-hmm. Okay, freshman, ding, 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 ding.
Mm-hmm. And then, one transfer.
Right. And then I'm done. Right? Do some research on a couple of guys, update the existing players from the time Penn State played them during the season. Mm-hmm. And, I could get literally, I remember one time I did this happen a couple of times, 5 teams in one day. Because it's,
when it's Purdue, it's like, okay, same thing. Take one guy out, move one guy in.
All right, they played December. They played back on December 5th. What have they done since they played Penn State? Ding, 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 ding. Updated. You're fine. Okay, their guys don't really change. Mm-hmm. When they get a transfer, it's like, what?
Yeah.
Well, you did? And so now that's just me getting ready. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now the next part is, if I'm doing this research to get ready, what does it mean for the fans? Like, where there are points in the movie you feel like you're in the early stages of the movie Major League, where now I realize that that's an extreme case, but the 2 groundskeepers who don't speak English, okay, are over there looking at it and go, who are these guys? And then they go. Then they go to the cafe where they're getting coffee. Like, I don't know what any of these guys are, right? Right? And that is what you're fighting at times with fans. So Indiana got used to having Mackenzie and Baco out there. I don't know what Ballo's going to do. I have no idea.
Yeah,
right. But Baco's been with them. And I think Malik Renew. I'm trying to think if he put his name into the portal or not. I think he
Renew is at Miami.
He went to Miami. John Ruiz says hello. And I think that's the big guy down there, right? John Ruiz.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but the fans there got used to Malik Reneau being out there. They get used to Mackenzie and Baco being out there.
And Ballo is going to the draft.
He's going to go to the draft? Okay. See, he was in the G League Elite thing. I'm not surprised Ballo's going because he went from Arizona to Indiana. But they got used to the guys being there. And now, new coach, Darian DeVries, who, by the way, is bringing his very talented son with him. He only played 8 games for West Virginia last year because he was hurt. But they have to get used to a whole new roster. So I'm saying from my point of view, I have to sit there and I have to look at all these rosters and like, okay, all the changes, all the transfers and everything like that. Well, as a professional, that's my job. But you as a fan, it's hard to get attached.
Yeah. That's the thing is like I'm attached as a Saints fan because for years I watched Drew Brees. I watched Cameron Jordan, Mark Ingram. If you're a Penn State fan for 3 years, you've watched Drew Aller play. You've watched Nick Singleton, Kaytron Allen. If you're a fan of the Kings, I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah.
The Sacramento Kings. I apologize in advance.
Yeah.
But like you buy into these players and you feel like you're friends with them because after a while, like I have seen Cam Jordan since he was drafted in 2010. So for 15 years, I've been following him and his story in the NFL. And I know he's got 3 kids and I know he has a wife and he loves certain things he likes. And like you just naturally over time, you learn things.
Does he know you stalk him? Or?
No.
Okay, I thought I'd throw it out
But
there.
the point is, over time, you learn things about the people. Like, everyone's followed Drew Aller for 3 years. You're attached to him.
Sure.
And it's just kind of what it is.
Right.
And even if you don't like a player, you're attached to them, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I do actually miss him because I liked him a lot.
I wish it were possible to have more, quote, developmental programs out there. Penn State in football is a developmental program. I would love to see basketball be a developmental program. Yeah. And I thought maybe they had an opportunity to do it. I think that opportunity's come and gone because I just think there's just so much. It's such a transient sport now. I think it's almost impossible to get a kid as a freshman, have him be a backup, ascend to a starting spot. Everybody get.
Now it's a mercenary sport.
Right, college basketball just is not like that. And I'm saying that if I'm sitting there doing the learning curve on all these teams, all those fan bases have to do a learning curve on their teams. They don't have to worry about the other 17 teams in the Big Ten, but they have to do a learning curve on their team.
I'm sitting here as a Syracuse fan. I could not tell you who is on that team next season for Syracuse men's basketball. I do not, off the top of my head, know.
Right.
Like, I'm going to go look it up now because I'm genuinely curious.
Sure.
Syracuse Orange men's basketball.
You may have the 24-25 roster on there.
We're going to find out in a second. And as it loads up, we have the 24-25 roster.
Yeah.
And 25-26 is not there.
It's not there.
I don't know
now
off the top of my head who's on the roster now.
Usually July 1, they'll change it over. There's certain schools, like, for example, in the Big Ten, the two that wait the longest to do it are UCLA and Michigan State. And other schools are like right around July 1, they'll kick it in. There's sometimes it's not until maybe August where Michigan State and UCLA put out their roster. Like, okay, now you can kind of get around it a little bit by like, okay, let's look at some news. Let's look at some news articles, things like that. Okay, he's transferred in. You know, like I knew about the UCLA last year. They called them the Quick Fix Six. So I knew that they were coming in. The question to me was who left.
Yes, it was who's remaining.
Right. In other words, those six came in. Who did they replace?
Yeah.
Well, I can't sit there and guess.
Yeah, which six left and which of the other players also was just in general graduated, whatever else. Like,
may have graduated, may have whatever. Right. But those two, and Michigan State surprises me because their roster is relatively stable.
Izzo keeps it a pretty tight ship in terms of players.
I don't know how much he's doing now that he's a co-interim athletic director, which is what he is at the moment. But it's I think it's always important in these discussions to bring up the forgotten group. And the forgotten group too often in sports are the fans. Oh, until you need ratings. Oh, I need ratings.
Oh, we need more seats and people in seats.
I need attendance. I need,
why aren't you buying our jerseys?
Why aren't you buying PSLs? All right, and then buy the tickets. Okay, oh, now they need you. Right? They're making the decisions. They never come up. Now, it used to be when they made decisions, the players didn't come up either. Okay? In college sports. I'm talking about in college sports.
It was all based around money.
It was all based around, because he had this, you are paying for scholarships and room and board and food and things like that. But, and then finally they got some stipend money, cost of attendance. That's what they called it. I mean, why do you think they call student athletes? You ever ask yourself why? You want the answer? Legalese. No, seriously.
Yeah.
Why the legalese of student athlete? Because the legalese of student athlete means that you're indicating that you're not going to pay them. They are students who are also athletes. See, that's why they came up with the again, we're in this, remember, we actually had a president one time say it depends on what the definition of is. I'm like going, what? The ability to turn phrases and use language to make you say, okay, why? What's that?
May I bring up one final point?
Sure.
In this, the next chunk of it for me that has to be looked at to some capacity is what also takes place with the high school commits when it comes to all the different sports. I'll give one example that happened this morning. Or last night, actually. 5-star defensive end Richard Wesley had committed to Oregon 2 weeks ago, 14 days ago.
Sure.
Today announced He is no longer committed to Oregon.
Okay. Yeah, but these are verbal commitments.
I know. But
so verbal commitments change all the time. So that goes back to the beginning of time. That doesn't surprise me.
That just always hurts my head because we see like a billion people commit, decommit, commit, decommit.
Well, they make a visit and emotions kick.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why and this has been for years. College football should have the early signing period not in December, but the first Wednesday of August. Okay? That way, when we get after the first Wednesday in August, look, for Penn State, 90+% of the guys that have committed to them, okay, we'll just take the Penn State, okay? They're committed to them in May, June, July, whatever. 90+% of them end up signing in December. Just get it over with so they can enjoy their senior season the way high school basketball players can, because the early signing period is the second Wednesday of November. They can go through their season, and guess what coaches can do? Coach their teams. Sure, they'll make appearances, just to make sure that, hey,
just want to check in.
Right, we're just going to check in. I'm here watching your game. Hey, we love you. The whole thing. I can't wait for you to get here. We'd love to have you now. Right? And the same thing with coaches in college football. Okay, you can lock in on your team. Yeah, it's okay to take a Friday night and go out and start, and look at guys that you've already recruited and assigned with you, while also looking at guys that you're looking for your sophomore and junior classes. But most players and their families, I think, would be happy. And if you don't want to sign on the first Wednesday of August, you have the first Wednesday of February still there. That has never changed. That first Wednesday in February has never changed. And this, to me, is a system where it's worked in college basketball for 30 years. Okay? Well, what's been wrong with it? Okay? I've only remember one time where there was one of those really crazy circumstances where John Beilein's coaching Michigan. Spike Albrecht, who had 17 in the first half in the national championship game against Louisville, has had injuries. He had a hip problem and so forth. And he gets to what is going to be his last season at Michigan. So John's recruiting. I like John. It's a good dude. Right? John's recruiting. And he knows Spike, among others, his scholarship is available at the end of the year. He's in his last season of eligibility. So he gives out a scholarship.
Yeah.
Okay? For the next group. 8th game of the season, Spike gets hurt. Well, and he misses the rest of the season. He then applies for an extra year from the NCAA and gets it. Except there's no room at the inn.
Someone's got to
go.
At
Michigan, because they had 13 scholarships and all 13 were taken, including his. And you say, well, it was his scholarship. No, he was He
was planning ahead.
Right? And in other words, everybody knew it was his last year, eligibility-wise. They didn't know this was going to happen. He was going to get hurt, so he ended up transferring to Purdue and played his last season at Purdue. Now, it'll be remedied somewhat this year because under the new system, Spike Albrecht could have returned to Michigan because he would have been the 14th scholarship out of 15. Right? So you could have remedied it that way. But that's the only time in college basketball that I can remember where the early signing period threw a curveball into it because of a circumstance that nobody anticipated injury-wise. Right? And I think in college football, college basketball has shown you that it can work. Do it. Stop playing around with this. It's right before Christmas. Stop playing around with this. Okay, let's do it right after the last regular season. You just put it in August, the first Wednesday in August, because guess what? You're going to have a bunch of players that are happy. They know what they're doing with their lives a year from now. They can enjoy their senior season. They can get themselves ready to go to the school they're going to sign with. Everything across the board. Same thing. We've planned out. We know how many we've got. Okay, how many do we have to give away in the first Wednesday of February? There's still a couple of guys out there. I don't understand why they don't change that up.
Crazy.
Thank you for listening to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a 7 Mountain Media production. Come back at 11 every weekday for analysis of the latest happening in the sports landscape. From college football to European soccer, Steve and Kyle cover it all on